edition of the Board Game Geek podcast, where we geek out about board games, the mechanisms behind them, and the people who create them. I'm your host, Candace Harris, and I'm here with Mandi Hutchinson from Salt and Sass Games on Twitch, YouTube channel, and the podcast. How's it going today, Mandi?
It's so good, especially good after hearing that music. What?
Thank you. Yeah, for some reason, when I was trying to think of theme music for this podcast before we launched it, this is an old idea that I recorded back in like 2011, and I wrote it for my band to use, but we never ended up using it. And I think it was just like a little too happy of a vibe for what we were going for. But it seemed like it was like something that could be, good, work out good for a podcast. So I'm glad you like it.
No, it's so good. I love it.
What's new with you?
Oh my gosh, so many things are new. I mean, always playing games. We know that's a thing, right?
Oh yeah. So many games.
Yeah, doing our own podcast and work. That's the big things for me right now.
Work.
For everybody.
What are some recent things you've been talking about on Salt and Sass?
Oh, well, so many things. One of the games, actually. Or are we jumping into games? Because I'm about the games.
Oh, we'll jump into games in a minute, unless is it one of your Fresh Plays games?
Oh, it is. Okay, sorry, I was getting ahead. I was so excited, everybody, that I was just like, oh my gosh, games. No. We have actually been doing other things on the channel. Actually, we were discussing a video game that I played, because I play video games, and I'm sure there are a lot of people that do as well.
Yep.
And the last one I played was called Inkulinati. And like everyone's like, what's this? So it's on PC and Xbox Game Pass, and I have to tell you, it has a medieval theme, and it's very Monty Python-esque.
Nice.
So it very much has that, like I fought in your general direction kind of vibe to it. So it was quite fun.
That's cool. Yeah, I'm not really deep into the video game world at all.
Okay.
Like maybe once or twice a year, I'll get into something fun on Twitch, and it'll hold my attention for maybe a week, here and there. But I don't know. Video games have never. I grew up playing them, and I like them a lot. But for some reason, I just never dive really deep into them. But I know a lot of people do, including my brother. So what's the game like? Like, what are you doing?
So it has
the theme.
The name's kind of cool. It has a medieval type theming to it, and it's a battle type of game. So you have yourself and your kind of little army, which are rabbits in my case, and you're going against
awesome.
Somebody else, and then they have their army, and in this case I think it's like donkeys and dogs or something to that effect. And you have different actions you can take to basically take them out so you can win. Then this includes also pushing them off the edge of the platform that you're fighting on. And also, I know this sounds a little crass, but farting in their but it gives them like a disability, like a disadvantage, in the game.
Hilarious.
So
that's hilarious.
Yeah, so I mean, it sounds really ridiculous, but it's actually quite fun and kind of hard. So I'm enjoying it.
That's cool. That's cool. Well, today we're going to talk about Votes for Women.
Yeah.
It's a new card-driven game about the American women's suffrage movement from 1848 to 1920, and it's designed by Tori Brown and published by Fort Circle Games, who sent me a review copy of it. And, Fort Circle is all about creating fun, easy-to-learn historical board games. I really enjoyed their debut release, The Shores of Tripoli, which was designed by their founder, Kevin Bertram. And I'd been interested in Votes for Women ever since Eric Martin originally posted about it in BGG News, I think almost 3 years ago. Wow. So then, Mandi, when I saw you tweeted about it, that you had played it, I was like, ooh, we should talk about that together and just share some initial impressions. So we're going to talk about Votes for Women today. But before we start digging into Votes for Women, I'd love to hear what you've been playing lately, Mandi, especially since you are very eager to talk about it. So let's jump into Fresh Plays.
All right, first on my list, this has been sitting there for a while. I'm like, I need to get this played. My game group has a thing with asymmetrical games, but I'm like, we're doing it. So the first game that we played
Nice.
with them that night was Ahoy. And this was released in 2022, designed by Greg Loring Albright, published by Leader Games, and plays 2 to 4 players. So Ahoy is what you consider a light asymmetrical game where we take on roles of swashbucklers and soldiers and try to gain fame. So in the game, those are points. Each player plays a certain role. There's the smuggler, bluefins, or the mollusks. I'm so sorry, everybody. I have a real hard time with this word, mollusks.
Oh. No, it's a hard one to pronounce.
It's so tricky. I don't know why I struggle. So I apologize for that, everybody. So smuggler, bluefins, or the mollusks. And on each turn, we take 2 actions with our dice, but the bluefins do get that extra action. Each character has an objective. Smugglers are trying to deliver goods and hedge their bets on who's going to maintain control of the islands. Meanwhile, the mollusks and the bluefins are trying to gain control of these tiles in the game, and they are willing to battle each other to do so. Once you hit 30 points, that triggers endgame, and then most points wins the game.
Yeah, I actually have played Ahoy a couple times. Yes. I was waiting until you finished describing it to let you know that. But yeah, I played Ahoy quite a few times because I like Leader Games. Yeah. And of course, like Kyle's art is so dope on all of their games. But yeah, it's a fun little pirate asymmetrical game. I really enjoyed it, and each game that I played, I think I played about 3 times.
Yeah, maybe? I think that's about how many times I've played it.
Yeah, it always kind of panned out a little bit differently too.
Yes.
But it's a great option for something that's not, because usually like you think asymmetrical games like it's going to be something heavy, but this is got a nice lighter tone to it. And it's pirates.
Well, and it's funny because pirates, I'm going to be straight up with everybody. Pirates, not really my jam. It's just not a theme that really draws me in. There's nothing wrong with it. It's just not something that drew me in. Yeah. So it's kind of like, okay, we'll see. And asymmetrical, as you were saying, usually you think of something heavy, which I don't mind. I love heavy games, but depending on who I'm playing with, they're not a fan. And I have to say, went over really well. And the theme actually was great. Everybody was really into it. So awesome. Having that theme and then the characters, I think everyone kind of picked characters that resonated with their personality, which was a little concerning if you picked the bluefins because they're a little aggressive. We had a lot of fun with that. So there were definitely a lot of tense moments, but I find playing with different people, they take on different ideas of how the game should be played. So like those crew cards. I had someone who was just snapping up all the crew cards. I'm like, hello, you're a smuggler. You need those cards to fulfill your cargo.
Yes. I had that too. I had that with someone I played with too, where she was taking all of those cards as the smuggler. But at that point, we were all like brand new to the game too. But yeah, it's like that's kind of working against what you're
supposed to be doing.
Yeah.
Exactly. So, I mean, overall, like those were some of the things that were enjoyed. Also, big fan of player aids, and this one gave everybody a player aid. I know that's kind of an afterthought. Yeah. That's important, especially when you have these types of games where you have to remember a few types of actions. The only concern that I had was we talked about the cards, potentially taking those cards and being stuck like, what do I do? And then there was the clouds. Some of these tiles have clouds where you can kind of hide in them because you don't have to face combat. So is that a strategy? Because you can hide there. People can't attack you. So I was like, how's this going to work? So, kind of a few edge cases came up, but overall I thought the game was really good. So for me, Ahoy was a winner.
Cool. Well, I just had my family in town for a visit. My mom and my nephew came to visit. Thanks. And every time they come, they love playing games, but they say, no new games. We don't want to learn a new game. And so what do? Make them learn a new game.
That's always how it goes.
But I try to find something that I think they'll be able to get into and that they'll like. And so one of those games that actually ended up being the hit for the weekend while they were here was Yokai Septet.
Ooh.
This is a team-based trick-taking game, which was originally released in Japan, I think back in 2015.
Oh, wow. Okay.
but it went on Kickstarter sometime in 2020, the beginning of 2022, I believe. And I ended up backing it, and I got my copy sometime last year. So I have the second edition, which is published by Ninja Star Games, and it is designed by Yio and Miyuki Yokuchi. And Miyuki Yokuchi is also the designer of Cat in the Box, which is,
cool.
You probably have played that
So
and
good.
know about very, very popular release or new edition release last year in 2022. But yeah, my copy is published by Ninja Star Games. This game, even though it's kind of designed as a 4-player team-based 2 versus 2 game, you can also play it with 3 players. And that is really an awesome way to play it as well. So this trick-taking game has 7 suits, and each suit has 7 cards. But the rank of each card varies, or each suit, not each card. So, like for example, the purple suit has cards numbered 2 through 8, whereas the red suit has cards numbered 6 through 12. So all 7 suits all have a 7 in the deck, and your goal in this game is to try to win 7s. But there's kind of a catch to it also, because you want to make sure you're going to win a lot of 7s, but if you're not going to win a lot of 7s, you don't want to win a lot of tricks.
Right.
So basically, you'll deal out all the cards, all 49 cards, and then the last card is the only one that doesn't get dealt to players, and you flip it over, and that's going to be your dominant suit or your trump suit for the round. You'll sit diagonally from your partner, so both your opponents are on your right and left side directly. And then after you get your hand of cards, you're going to pick 3 of your cards and pass them to your partner. And initially, when you've never played the game, you're probably like, oh, I don't know which ones to pass. But usually in must-follow trick-taking games, it's like a good idea to kind of get rid of cards that you have only a few of, so you'll have some flexibility of playing whatever you want. So anyway, we learned as we kind of like started playing, but it's a must-follow trick-taking game, meaning if I play a green card, everybody has to follow with a green card if you have one. Otherwise, you can play whatever you want. And the winner of the trick is going to be either the highest card in the lead suit, or if somebody played a trump card, the highest trump card. But in this game, there's also the green suit has an A. And I will also say there is some kind of theming to this game that didn't really quite stick with us. So that's why I'm just saying colors. Right. But the artwork is really, really cool. So yeah, so there's a green card that has an A, and that is the strongest. So if somebody plays an A, it's going to beat everything. When you win, you're going to keep all the tricks separate for your team. And anytime you win a 7, you keep that face up. So you could see who's won, which team has won how many tricks, and who has how many 7s. You keep playing until the round ends in a couple ways. So it can win if a team ends up winning 4 7s. It'll end immediately, and that team is going to be the winner of the round. And also, when you win that way, you're going to look at the 7s you won. If you won a trump 7 or the dominant color 7, that gets tossed away. But then your other cards, you will have a point value on them. Most of them have points on them, not all of them. But then you'll get these like point tokens. And it's the first team that gets to 7 point tokens wins the whole thing. So you might get like, I don't know, a couple point tokens from winning a round. But the other way the round can end, or another way, not the only other way, is if one team wins 7 tricks, but they have 3 or less 7s that they won.
Oh.
So again, if you get 4 tricks, you win the round. Your team wins the round. Or I'm sorry, if you win 4 7s, you win the round. But if you get to 7 tricks and you have 3 or less 7s, you lose and the other team wins the round. The other way the round can end is if you just run out of cards. Then whichever team ended up with one of their teammates being the lead player, that team would win. And I don't think any of our games ended that way. Oh. Usually it'd be like somebody quote unquote busting by getting the 7 tricks and not having enough 7s. But it's like, it's really, it's a really, really cool game. And you have some really interesting decisions, especially, you're trying to win 4-7s. But then if you get to a point where, oh my goodness, like we've won 5 tricks and we only have 2 7s. Now we need to try to pump the brakes and hopefully not win tricks unless we're sure we can win 2 more 7s. So there's this like tension. And then meanwhile, the other team, if they see you have like, oh, they've won 5 tricks, let's help them win some more so that we can win the round. So it has like a really cool dynamic to it. And then like once you get how the game goes, the cards you pass to your opponent are more meaningful. It's a good way to kind of communicate with them. Like sometimes I would pass my opponent 7s because then I know, oh, Mandi, I know you have the yellow and the black 7. So, that's some data for me. So it's also like really fun playing around with that. And I love how that all the suits have the same amount of cards, but the ranking is different. And they put the range of the rank on each card too. So if you're looking at a red card, it'll tell you these cards go from 6 to 12 or whatever. So what is the lowest of this suit and what is the highest, and you can kind of factor that into your decision. But the other thing is like I don't know if have you ever played Teach You before?
Okay, no judgments. I have it. I have not played it.
No judgment. I have only played Teach You once, and I really enjoyed it. Bought it. I remember I bought the app for my iPad. And then I just like never got to play it again. Right. And I think it's a game that I'm going to love, but I think this game, even just from that one play of Teach You, maybe it's the team playing and the passing cards to your opponent or your partner that like kind of reminded me of Teach You a little bit. But we just had such a blast playing this game. Like when I first dealt the initial set of cards, I think I was teammates with my partner, Matt. And then my mom and nephew were on a team together. And I said, like, let's do a trial round just so we can all make sure we understand what's going on. My mom and nephew ended up scoring 6 points from that trial round.
Wow.
And they were like, why is this a trial round? This isn't a trial round. This should be. So anyway, I called that game 0. But then, so we restarted. And then Matt and I ended up winning, maybe after playing a couple rounds. Then we switched partners. I was with my nephew. We won again. And my nephew was pulling off some cool moves where he was able to win, or we were able to win 2 7s in one trick.
Wow, that's good.
So we were very, very efficient. And he pulled that off twice. It was really, really impressive. And then we played like a couple 3-player games when my nephew was kind of taking a nap at some point. And the 3-player version is like a little bit different, but it's still like really, really good.
Nice.
Then I ended up partnering with my mom and we won. So every partnership game I was on there and I was a winner. But when we did the individual 3-player game, I think Matt and my mom both won and I did not win on my own. So we were just like making jokes and like, I think we played it every day since the first day that I taught it to them. And they couldn't get enough of it. I love trick-taking games, but like this one is definitely high up there for me. And I'm kind of looking forward to playing it more. And that is Yokai Septet. What else have you been playing, Mandi?
Oh my goodness. Well, now we've had that amazing chat about trick-taking games. I'm like, well, mine's kind of short. Not as exciting, but
short but good.
But still good. Yes. Spoiler alert, it's a good one. So yeah, it's a fantasy realms, but I'll be looking specifically at the Deluxe edition. This was released in 2022. I actually didn't know until I was approached about it. And designed by Bruce Glasgow, published by WizKids, and it plays 3 to 6 players. So you definitely need those higher player counts for this one. So the Deluxe edition, for those who have it, let me start with this. You're wondering, like, what's in the Deluxe edition? You're going to have the same cards as you had before, just some new art and graphic design. There's a Cursed Horde expansion, and that also has new graphic design. And you also have some promotional cards and art sleeves, so you can sleeve all of the cards. So, so which is really nice.
Cool.
Yeah. In the original Fantasy Realms, just to give an idea of how the game plays, you're building your realm by collecting different types of cards. So it could be wizards, land cards, army cards, and there are a variety of suits and values. And on those cards will be, I don't know, maybe objectives. I'm not sure how you'd want to say, but there are things on those cards that need to be resolved at the end of the game. And you're going to have to try and make sure your hand has the cards for you to resolve it. Some of them are from hand. Some of them are going to be ones that are on the table. So you're going to start with 7 cards. Each turn, you'll draw a new card from the deck or the discard area, but you have to discard one from your hand. This is where it gets tricky. You're like, I'm going to keep all these cards. Well, you can't. So you have to make some tough decisions. And then whoever's realm scores the most points is the winner. With the Deluxe edition, there's a slight change where if you play with the Cursed Horde, your card limit in your hand, it ends up being 8, and the game will trigger upon 12 cards being played versus 10 in the original. That's literally the game. And there's not much more to say about it. The Cursed Horde cards add that element where they'll give you an ability, but they do have some negative points that you want to try to recoup with cards in your realm. You don't have to use them, but they can be helpful depending on the one that you get. So it's a little random in that case. So this game for me, I mean, first time I saw the box, I'm going to be very honest. I was like, what's this game about? I don't know if this is for me. Kind of like, I'm not sure. Yeah. And then I was like, wow, this is pretty good. So I was like, it's snappy, easy to play. Like, this is a game you can play over and over again, like in a short amount of time.
Yes. Yep.
The added suits, and I think I should have mentioned this, they added a suit, the Undead. And that's a tricky one to play with. I feel that one gives you so many negative points if you don't focus on it. Do you know what I mean? So like if you're just kind of like, it's in my hand, but then I'm like, you can't leave that there. You have to do something with it. So I find that's a little tricky but fun. So it's a nice change. And adjusting your strategy based on the cards you have. This is a kind of game, as someone who's a tactical player, that I enjoy. I like, oh, this is a good card. Okay, wait, now I got to look at my hand and possibly change this card to make this card work. I love that. I'm not a planner, so for me, I like this kind of change of pace when I draw a new card. So cool. Yeah, so it kind of fires all the synapses in my brain. Some of the things that I worried about was the Cursed Horde deck. I didn't find it particularly useful for me, and it's a bit random, right? Because it's whatever you draw, it's what you're going to use or not use. I found most of the time it just sat there for a lot of people. Like you had some that were negative 20 points, but the ability was really good. But even then, was the trade-off worth it? And I guess this is a way that if you wanted to give yourself a challenge, you could, hey, I'm going to do it and try not to get those minus 20 points. But for me, it was like, I don't know if it was necessary. So that was probably the biggest thing for me. And they changed the box size. So the box size, I think, was a little bit smaller. And it is slightly bigger now because you have sleeved cards and potentially maybe something else might come in the future. Who knows? But overall, I did actually really enjoy the game. I mean, I enjoyed it to begin with, and with these light additions, I do like the sleeved art on the cards. It's really pretty. I mean, pretty games catch my eye, of course, but it is also a very good game. So if you haven't tried this game, it is one that I highly recommend. So Fantasy Realms, you don't have to get the Deluxe edition. In this case, this is what I'm talking about. Really nice game.
I totally agree. And Fantasy Realms has always been kind of a hit filler game with people that I play with because, at the end of the night when you're kind of like finishing something like a bigger, longer, heavier game, it's just something like easy to pull off the shelf. It's quick to play. And you're right. Like it's so fun trying to figure out how to combo your hand to make, to earn as many points as you can. Exactly. And you never want to discard anything. So like it's so hard because you're like, well, somebody else might need this, or you just want to hold everything, but you can't. And it's
a struggle.
It's a struggle. But yeah, good pick. I was kind of curious about the Deluxe edition too, because I haven't seen in person the Deluxe edition. But I did actually have, I used to have the original edition and then I had the new edition and the Cursed Horde. Right. Is that what
Cursed Horde, expansion.
Yeah. And I did play the expansion and I don't remember all the names of the different cards and everything, but I do remember some of those cards that you're saying that you can kind of like swap out, that some of them are like, eh.
Yeah. There will be people who will enjoy trying to negate those points, but for me, I personally didn't see the added bonus.
Yeah. Yeah, but this is definitely a good one to check out. And I think if Fantasy Realms, do they have like a Marvel version of this too?
Yeah, Marvel
Quiz
Remix.
Kids and Marvel Remix, which is like a slight variation on it. And then Star Trek or something?
Well, we discussed this on our podcast, and it did make the one and done segment of our podcast.
Oh!
So it was not a favorite of ours for many reasons, but that was probably the only one of the mix that I played that I wasn't too keen on.
Okay. I wasn't actually too keen on the Marvel one.
Okay.
I'm not a big Marvel person, and I only played it once. So you always have to caveat when you only play something once, because it could have been other factors.
Absolutely.
But it to me, it just didn't really pop as much as the original game.
Yeah, original, but it's great. So
yeah, but I wouldn't, I wouldn't be opposed if somebody was like, oh, let's play some Marvel Remix Fantasy Realms.
Exactly.
Sure, I'm down. And I haven't. Now I'm kind of curious about the other one, the Star Trek.
You'll have to try it, and then we'll have to reconvene, and you can give your thoughts, and we'll see if we came to a similar consensus or very different.
Cool. Fantasy Realms. Love it. So the second game that I'll mention is Rumble Nation. I don't know if you've ever played. This is another Japanese game, and
we do know this one. Oh, this one's good. Sorry.
Yeah.
Sorry.
So this was a game, of course, again, when my family is like, we don't want to learn anything new. And I was like, just looking on my shelf, I'm like, I'm going to make them learn something new. And I was just trying to figure out what it was going to be. And I have games for anybody on my shelf. And so I was like, you know what? I think they would like this. And I had my mom play Wordcraft with me a couple months ago, and I was like, this is her first area control game. But I'm like, I'm building her up. But Rumble Nation is a game. It was originally released in 2017 by 77 Spiel. And then I have the 2019 English-Japanese edition from Hobby Japan. Okay. And the designer is Yogi Shinichi. And this is an area control dice game for 2 to 4 players where we are warlords during the Sengoku era civil war. And you're trying to, have supremacy in Japan. And this is a very abstract game. But, but I do want to say the theme that was, thrown out there. But the game board is basically an abstract map of Japan with really gorgeous art. And at the beginning of the game, you're going to randomly place these 11 face down castle tokens. And the values on the tokens are 2 through 12. And then each player is going to have a player color, and you're going to get 18 cubes of your color. So this game is divided into 2 phases. The first phase is the deployment phase, where you're going to put cubes out on the board. And then the second phase of the game, you're going to have a war phase, where you're then going to resolve everything that you put onto the board. The cool thing is, and this is why I had a feeling that my mom in particular would like this. She likes dice. For the deployment phase, you're going to either get a tactics card and use it, which I'll talk about later, but the main thing you're going to be doing is rolling 3 dice, D6, and you can optionally re-roll if you don't like the results one time. But then you're going to look at those 3 dice, and you're going to split them into 2 and 1. And the dice you choose for your 2 dice are going to dictate the location on the board where you're going to place your cubes. And then the other die, the lone die, is going to tell you how many soldiers you can put out, or cubes. And the way it works is, if it's a 1 or a 2, you put out 1 cube. If it's a 3 or 4, you put out 2 cubes. And if it's a 5 or a 6, you put out 3 cubes. And then for the other 2 dice, you're just going to add them together. So if I, used a 3 and a 2, that means I'm going to, for my location, that means I'm going to put it on location 5. And maybe my other die is a 3. So that means I put 2 cubes in location 5. So you're going around the table, you're doing this, you're putting cubes out into these 11 different areas on the board. And then you can optionally use a tactics card. So each game you're going to have number of players plus 1. So in a 4-player game, you'll have 5 tactics cards that are out there. So on your turn, instead of rolling the dice and placing cubes, you can trigger take one of these tactics cards and trigger it. And these tactics cards let you do cool things like move your opponent's cubes, or, maybe pull back some of your cubes or move your cubes somewhere else. They're fun little things that kind of interrupt the normal flow of the game. And it's also cool because the game comes with 12 different tactics cards. So, you shuffle them and randomize them. So you'll have a different mix of which ones are in play for each game, which is nice. Mm-hmm. But anyway, you're going to keep doing this until everybody's got all of their cubes on the board. The first person that ends up with all of their cubes on the board is going to take the top sword token, which in a 4-player game will have 4 swords on it. Then the next player to run out of cubes, they're going to get the next sword token, which will have 3 swords on it, so on and so forth. So when the war phase happens, these sword tokens are tiebreakers. So if you're tied with someone in an area, you're going to see if your sword token has more swords, you're going to break the tie. But the war phase is really cool because you're going to go and resolve all those castle tokens, all the different 11 areas in order, ascending order, starting with the 2 castle. And what you're going to do is just see who has the most cubes there. Again, if there's a tie, you compare sword tokens. So there's always an easy tiebreaker. And then whoever has the most cubes or breaks the tie gets that token. In this case, it's the first one, so it's a 2. That means it's going to be 2 points at the end of the game. The person with the second most cubes is going to get a smaller token that's half the value. And if it's an odd number, it's half the value rounded down. But what's even cooler, if you had the most influence in an area, you get to get reinforcement cubes. So reinforcement cubes are, you have this stack of, they're these little white cubes, which is not one of the player colors. And you'll get 2 of them that you can place in adjacent areas adjacent areas that haven't been resolved yet, as long as you have one of your cubes in that area. So what that means is if I won an area, let's say I win area 2, now I'm getting 2 cubes that I could put in surrounding areas that have my cubes to kind of beef up my forces, which is really, really cool. And it also kind of incentivizes you to make sure when you're placing cubes on the board, you're not focused on one area, so that you can actually take advantage of this. So anyway, you go through and you just resolve all the areas and collect these different point tokens if you win the castles. And at the end of the game, whoever has the most victory points is going to win. I want to make a comment. In one of my games, I rolled 666 twice.
Wow.
So
good.
Yeah.
So good.
So nobody was taking that 12 space from me, those 12 points from me. It was awesome. We could not believe it. We were using a dice roller too, for the most part. But yeah, I like this one a lot because number one, it's very easy to learn. It's quick to play. You have really interesting choices with the way you split your dice and how you position yourself on the board to kind of try to position yourself for those reinforcements, which are really, really helpful. And then I love the fact that, the balance of the first person who gets rid of all their cubes gets the best tiebreaker. But the longer you stay in, the more kind of say you have on what the game state is, right before the war phase kicks off. So that's kind of a fun trade-off. And again, my family, they really liked it, and, they got it. As soon as they played one game, they're like, oh, and they saw how the reinforcements work. They were like, let's play again. Yeah. Let's play again.
That's so good.
Have you played Rumble Nation?
Oh, yes. I played this. Yeah. I went to visit a friend, Corey, hello if you're listening, in the States. And for those who don't know, I'm Canadian. So I went to the United States for a visit with my co-host, Suzanne. And actually, they were both familiar with this game. I had not played it. And usually any type of area control games I'm iffy about. I'm a Euro gamer, so sometimes I get a little, funny about this sort of thing. But we really enjoyed it. And it's definitely one of those games where you can't get too comfortable. I do that sometimes. I'm like, I got this in the bag. I'm like, oh, nope. I let that slide for too long. I need to
pay attention.
Exactly.
Yep.
But again, I like that kind of change in the game. It keeps me interested and involved. So no, I really enjoyed Rumble Nation. And little sad that I hadn't heard about it earlier, because I think, is this a little tricky to get?
Yes. Yeah. And I'll tell you, my secret to getting it was, I think there's some that are available on the BGG market, but I think I ended up buying it from Amazon.jp, like the Japanese Amazon.
Right. Okay.
And I want to say it was only about like 30 or $35 US.
Okay. So for us Canadians, that's like $45, $50.
That's a lot for this little one, but it's a cool game. Yeah, it's a cool game. And hopefully it'll be like more available at some point. Cause I think it's just like a very simple area control game, but like the fact that you have the tactics cards and the reinforcements, it really kind of like spices it up a bit.
Absolutely.
So that is Rumble Nation. Since it's we're in February and it's Black History Month, I thought it would be cool for us to just kind of maybe spotlight some designers or games that kind of, are related to Black History Month.
Yeah. So I had well, for those who don't know, I am friends with Mr. Eric Lang, and definitely falls into this category. And for those who don't know, Eric has designed many games that people know about. I know Blood Rage is always a really popular one, Ankh Gods of Egypt. And the one that I particularly stood out to me that I've played and I continue to enjoy is The Godfather, Corleone's Empire. And he did that in about 2017. And it's literally, if you're familiar with The Godfather, it's a worker placement game. And it has to do with a bit of murder and intrigue. I guess that's how they describe it. And you're playing as competing mafia families who are vying for economic control of organized crime networks in New York City. So you get to deploy your thugs, your Don, your wife, your heir, all of these things on the board to shake down businesses and engage in kind of like area control turf wars. Wow. Here I am with area control again. I think this is a theme for me today.
Maybe this is your favorite
right, it
game
must
mechanism.
Be. So that for me is one that I initially, again, had some hesitation, just because I know a lot of these games that are themed after television shows or movies, I kind of, I'm not sure, but really enjoyable. And a lot of my friends quite enjoy it. So shout out to Eric for that one. And what about you?
So I own that game.
Oh, you do? Okay.
Because I've heard nothing but great things about it. And I've been wanting to play it so much. This is another game that, as I try to cull my collection regularly, I'm like, no, I'm not getting rid of this, because I want to play it and see how much I like it. And, and I'm going to put this on my list. I'm going to just have a list going of kind of older games that I still have not played that I own that I need to get to the table. It's Absolutely. On my shelf of opportunity and I need to kind of like bump it up because I've heard great things about it. I love The Godfather. So I think, and I love Eric's games too. So
and this one's hard to find.
I'm excited to try it.
This one is hard. People have been telling me they're having a really hard time trying to find it. So if you own it and you haven't played it, play it.
or sell it. To somebody who wants to play it.
Yeah, exactly. There you go. That's it.
Cool. I wanted to give a shout out to Fertessa Allyse. I don't know if you've heard of her or seen her on Twitter. She is a Black female game designer. She has 2 games that one I think is just coming out in this month actually. So the one of them is Book of Villainy and it's from Gold Seal Games and it's a rondel set collection game for 2 to 4 players where you're competing as B-list villains and you're traveling around the city, getting into trouble, and then you're trying to write a best-selling novel about it. Like, this theme is just so cool and just like it makes me smile. Like I can't wait to play it. But this was Book of Villainy was successfully funded on Kickstarter in 2021. I believe it's just as of a couple weeks ago or a week ago started shipping to backers and I think they have it for pre-order, but I think it's going to be out officially sometime in February 2023. Nice. And again, I love the theme. I'm very curious to try it. And then Fertessa also has another game that came out maybe at Gen Con in 2022.
Okay.
I forget where I picked it up. There were so many conventions.
Yeah, there's a lot.
But it's called Wicked and Wise. It's from Weird Giraffe Games. And it's a team-based trick-taking game, which you know already that I'm into.
Right, exactly.
For 2 to 6 players, where you have these asymmetric roles within a team. Some players are dragons, others are mice, and the dragons kind of play this trick-taking game, whereas the mice are playing cards with abilities that have abilities on them to kind of manipulate the tricks. And then to win the game, you need to have more coins than your opponent team. And the way you get coins is you're going to set out these goals every round, and you're trying to achieve goals such as, win this amount of tricks or win a trick with this card, stuff like that. This is one that I was really, really hoping to play with my family, but I broke out Yokai Septet first because I figured it'd be a little easier for them to get into, right. And we just kind of got hooked on it. And yeah, my No More New Games crowd, I don't know if they could have handled a third new game, but next time. And this is something I'm going to try soon with, I've been talking about having a trick-taking night for a while with people who play a lot of games,
right.
Heavier games and trick-taking games a lot. So I'm really looking forward to trying Wicked and Wise. And so that's a shout out to Fertessa Allyse.
Oh, some great stuff there. And I definitely, these again are ones that I have. They need to be played, and I've heard great things. So I'm excited to try those as well. I did want to do one quick shout out to Tanya DePass. And Tanya, I apologize, I don't know their pronouns, so I'm going to say they, them, just for the time being. But there is a game that they co-wrote for, and it is Sea of Legends. So I haven't played this, but this is one that I'm like, I like narrative-driven board games, and Sea of Legends looks right up my alley. So a little shout out there to Tanya DePass and also to Sharise Nicole Williams, who did art on the same game. So this is just one on my list that I would also like to try.
Awesome. Well, should we start talking about votes for women, Mandy?
Oh, yes. This is a big one.
I guess I'll just jump right in and, votes for women. I don't remember if it came out in late 2022 officially or if it was early 2023. But again, it's designed by Tori Brown. Yeah, do you remember?
Yeah, it was. I know and I received a review copy, and I know it was on Kickstarter. So I didn't get it until early 2023, but I think it was around end of 2022. I think you are correct.
Okay, cool. Well, so Tori Brown, the designer, she is a longtime activist and works as a political communication strategist for progressive causes. I kind of talked about Fort Circle Game and their aim at making fun, accessible historical board games. A lot of them are focused on American history. Mm-hmm. And this game, Votes for Women, has graphic design by Bridget Indelicato and Mark Rodriguez. And it plays with 1 to 4 players.
In Votes for Women, and let's start off by saying I know a lot of these games generally tend to have a lot of moving pieces. So this one has cards. It's a card game about the American women's suffrage movement, which takes place in 1848 to 1920. So a little bit of history for everybody. You're going to have 2 sides battling to ratify or reject the 19th Amendment to the U.S. Constitution, which would give women the right to vote if it's ratified. This was a lot for me because I'm not American, so some of these terms I was not familiar with.
You probably didn't learn about some of this stuff
not the way maybe that you would have. Exactly. Yeah. So the suffragist side needs to push Congress to propose the 19th Amendment and campaign to have 36 states ratify the amendment. We're going to talk a bit more about that. Meanwhile, the opposition is trying to prevent Congress from proposing the amendment. And if that doesn't work, they have to have 13 states to reject it. So we need 36 to ratify. They need 13 states to reject. In the game, you have a map of the U.S. split into 6 different regions. Players will be adding and removing congressional markers to reflect Congress's support for the amendment, and each side will be placing cubes on the map to reflect their political power in the individual states. The suffragist player has purple and yellow cubes, and the opposition player has red cubes. We'll talk a bit more about the solo because this is what I played, so you'll see a bit of difference there. Each player has their own deck of event cards representing key historical figures and events.
So Votes for Women is played over 6 turns, but it could end sooner if the 36th state ratifies the amendment or the 13th state rejects the amendment. So those are, they're kind of like automatic victory conditions that could end the game early. But each turn think of a turn as a round. It has 4 phases: a strategy phase, a planning phase, a strategy phase, an operation phase, and then a cleanup phase. During the planning phase, you're simply going to draw 6 cards, and then you'll be up to 7 cards. So both players start the game with, when you're playing I'm going to talk about from the 2 players perspective.
No, please. Yeah. And I can jump in later.
Yeah. And we can talk solo and co-op and stuff more too. But, so each player will start the game with a card that has the word start on it. So each of your decks are going to be split into time periods: early, middle, and late. So you'll start with a start card, and then you'll draw up to 6 from your early cards, which are on the top of your deck. And that's pretty much the planning phase. You just draw cards up to 7. And then in the strategy phase, which you'll skip on the very first round of the game, you're going to have the opportunity to bid for strategy cards, which we can talk about a little bit more later. But in this game, you have buttons, which are really cool. It's your currency in the game, but they're cardboard tokens that look like buttons, like vote for women and and like don't vote for women, depending on what side you're on. But anyway, the operations phase is the meat and potatoes of the game, and that is where players are going to alternate playing a card from their hand. And you can play the card a couple different ways, but you're always going to play a card. So you could play a card as an event, and in that case, you are just going to resolve the event text on the card. So all of the cards have, either a key historical figure or event or, something that happened in history, and then it'll have some kind of gameplay mechanism that is tied to that event or person. And so you can play a card for the event and just do what the event says. There's a variety of events there are a variety of different types of events in the game. But you could also, a lot of them are going to have you manipulating cubes on the board. You're going to be, if you're on the suffragist side, you're going to be trying to place yellow and purple cubes on the board. If you're on the opposition side, you're going to be trying to remove those and place red cubes on the board. So it's very much a kind of tug of war game. But if you don't want to use a card for the event, you can simply discard it, and you have 3 other choices. One is you can take a campaigning action, which you'll have these little campaigner meeples that are out on the map. You'll start the game. Your start card is going to have you place 2 if you're on the suffragist side in the northeast region, and then I think if you're on the opposition side, 1 in the south, if I recall. But when you're campaigning, you are going to roll dice equal to the amount of campaigners you have on the board. So in the beginning of the game, you have 2. So you're going to roll 2 D12s. They're D12s, but they only go 1 through 4. Yep. So you're going to roll these D12s that go up to 4, 1 to 4. And so if I have 2 campaigners, I'll roll 2. And let's say I roll a 2 and a 4. Then I'm going to assign those dice to my campaigners and be able to put out that amount of cubes on the map. I should also mention those buttons we were talking about, like the currency of the game. You can always spend buttons to re-roll all of the dice whenever you're doing something where you're rolling dice. So that's an option. You have some flexibility there. I mean, it's still luck of the dice.
Sure.
But
yeah.
Yeah. But yeah, then you're going to put out cubes. And so each state is only ever going to have cubes of one side, the suffragist side or the opposition side. So if you want to add cubes in a place that has your opponent's cubes, instead you remove that many and then you can start adding them. It's very, very simple. And then the other thing you can do, so that's campaigning. With campaigning, you can also spend a button to move one of your campaigners to a different region before you actually place the cubes. So that's going to be a way for you to start spreading your influence when you take the campaign action. And then the other thing you could do with your card, if you don't want to play the event and you don't want to go campaigning, you could do an organizing action, which is simply gain buttons equal to the amount of campaigners you have out on the board. So that's just a way to get buttons. Although a lot of event cards will help you get buttons as well.
Absolutely.
Buttons are important in this game.
Yes.
And then the last thing you can do is you can play a card for a lobbying action, which you have in this game. I think there are 6 these cylinders, these white cylinders, which represent Congress markers or congressional markers. And that you need to, if you're on the suffragist side, you need to get those congressional markers out, because that is the only way you can start ratifying states, and also the opposition can start rejecting states. But so there's a whole push and pull with that within the overarching game that's going on. But that's the main thing you're doing with your cards. And then you also have these state and strategy cards that you might gain throughout the game, hopefully, that give you like a bonus action. So on your turn, you always must play one of your cards to do, either the event, campaigning, organizing, or lobbying. But then you can also, before or after your turn, play one of these state or strategy cards to kind of like beef up your turn a little bit. And they're really good. The way you get the state cards is by having 4 of your cubes in a state where, if a state card is in play for the game. The game is going to end either at the end of the 6th round. There might be a final vote phase if it's not fully resolved by the end of the 6th round. But basically, if you're the suffragist side, if you don't have that Congress support by the end of the 6th round, that's game over for you. The opposition wins. If you were able to get Congress's support, again, if 13 states reject it, the opposition will win. And if you get 36 states to ratify it, you will win as the suffragist player.
Yes.
So that's kind of like the overall flow. A lot of what you're doing is going to be putting cubes down into different states, trying to get those congressional markers off. Your opponent, whether it's a human opponent or the bot, is going to be trying to stop that kind of activity. Did I miss anything?
No, actually that was pretty good. There's a lot going on. So I think you covered it very well. And keeping in mind too, like I played this solo, so I had to use the Oppobot, which basically plays the opposition. So slightly different rule set there, but the idea is the same. So
yeah, and actually the first time I played it, I played with the Oppobot also, and I played it solo, but I played it cooperatively with my mom.
Okay, no.
So I didn't do the true co-op where we kind of split cards and stuff like that.
Sure.
I more so had her just, play with me and help me make decisions and kind of like see how this game works, because it's definitely not something that's in her wheelhouse.
Absolutely.
But it was cool to see that, it's so accessible that she was picking it up.
Yeah.
So that was cool. So what did you think about like the presentation of the game in terms of like the look and the components and the rule book from your perspective?
Yeah, so overall I'm a teacher by trade, so I'm really hard on rule books a lot of the time, and I'm a big proponent for player aids. So for me, that does not come in this game. I think this would benefit from that. The rule book overall was pretty clear. The only issue I had is if you were playing solo, I ended up my rule book fell apart because I was flipping back and forth so much, because when you get to the solo part, it doesn't reiterate the rules. It just tells you the changes for solo.
Yes.
So I had to, let me go back. Okay, no, go back to this page.
Right.
So I only almost wish that there was like a whole kind of like either redo or inserted somewhere in the main rules, this is what you do for solo or something along those lines. So again, that's a minor quibble because I just ended up photocopying the pieces I needed, but that is something I think just for layout purposes might have changed. The components I thought were really good. I mean, a lot of them were like the wooden pieces. The board itself was super thick, like it wasn't too flimsy. So I can't complain about the component quality there as well. Buttons were nice and thick, so that thick cardboard, so they were going to last. The states on
feel good in your hand.
Well, this is it. I'm all about how things are, the pieces feel when you're playing with them. The states on the board, I do wish they were larger. Now, I'm not American, but I still know geography and I have a general sense of where states are. But once you start putting cubes and campaigners, you can't see the states. So I'm like, I know, and I think I said when I was talking about this on our podcast, I'm like, I know Utah's here somewhere. But because there were cubes everywhere, I had to like move things off to see it. So maybe just a little bit bigger so to accommodate all of the pieces. And lastly, the additional information about the suffragette movement, the good and the bad. I'm glad that was included in there. So like official looking, like documents that you would have seen during that time. And it wasn't just talking about the positive things. There were some other things that led to that movement that weren't always so positive. So I appreciated that as well.
Yeah, I totally agree that this game could have benefited from a player aid.
Yeah.
But I did think I like the look and feel of it, and I now that you mentioned the states being a little bit bigger, yes, I did that a lot too, where I'm like sliding over campaigners or like where and I know I'm from America, so I know where a lot of the states are, but still, like you don't look at a map every day. But I loved the layout of the cards and the iconography. I thought was really great, and the photos on the cards were just really great and kind of suck you into the theme a little bit more. And I like the colors and the overall vintage feel of the game board. And as far as like playing with the bot, the numbering system was great. Like that made the bot kind of really easy to drive. Like once you get familiar with it, I thought the rulebook was pretty good overall. I really like how they broke down all of the components nicely. So they're like, here's what this is, here's what these things are, and kind of let you soak all that in, because I imagine this is going to be, I don't want to get ahead of myself, but like something for people to educate and, to get new gamers into historical board games, perhaps, or just modern board games in general. But I think the historical supplement was great, and the designer notes, and the fact that they included examples of the historical documents and, with a timeline and everything, that was cool. I think that's like, that was unexpected, but I think especially like if you're taking this game to schools and using it to like help students kind of understand this movement and this period of history, like all that stuff is like just gold. So overall, I thought it looks nice. I love the cover of it too. How did you feel about the theme and
that kind of, I guess me talking about the documents and whatnot kind of leads into this a little bit, because it was setting you up for the feel of the game, right? This is the game you're playing. Here's some background, historical aspect to the game. So I very much appreciated that. I did find myself, and this is uncommon for me to use, I know, as a gamer and someone who reviews games, you think I'd be better about it, but that's what Suzanne is for on my podcast. I like to just say, the green thing or the blue thing or this did this. And some people do prefer to have the use of the official name of things, but I did find this game was thematic in the sense that I did find myself using the lingo of the game as I played it, like ratification. You know what I mean? Like I know what those things are, but if I'm playing or explaining, I'm not going to use it necessarily. And I found myself saying those things. I'm like, okay, so for me, if that's happening, that means there was a strong sense of theme there. So I did appreciate that. Yeah.
Cool. Yeah, I thought like gameplay wise, like whatever side you're on, I know you've only played it solo, but like whatever side you're on, you feel the struggle, like there's a lot of tension, and there was like a lot of push and pull. And I think, again, that tied together with the historical notes on the event cards. So at the bottom of the event cards, there's just like one sentence on, if it's a person, like here's what was key about that person during this time. And, I found myself every time I play a card, like reading those notes. And then when you like are thinking about what you're doing with the card, it just like ties together so much. And then again, as the suffragist player, the fact that you have to push the Congress the Congress markers out there, and also keep up with getting your political influence in all the different states as you have these two things you're juggling. Yep. That's like, that felt to me very thematic. And then also the other thing was like location wise, like the events tie the gameplay to actual locations impacted by the person or whatever the current event was at the time. Like the Sojourner Truth card impacts the Midwest region since she was pushing to include Black women in the Ohio suffrage convention. Right. So it's like, that's cool how like now this event, when you play it, it's impacting the Midwest. Absolutely.
You feel the frustrations.
Yes, totally. And then it's like there's a card in the opposition deck that's the Great 1906 San Francisco Earthquake. And it just like hits the suffragists hard in California. So like to represent how natural disasters and long periods of expensive rebuilding disrupted political momentum. Right. So I think like from that perspective, it's like just really, really well done. And again, you feel the struggle regardless of which side you're on.
Absolutely.
So I played it again solo and cooperatively, solo/cooperatively with my mom against the Oppo bot. And I thought the Oppo bot was smooth to run. Like once we got going, it was a really nice bonding experience to also play this with my mom and have her kind of like understand what I find special about historical board games and just like, making her play a new board game too.
Yeah, no,
I snuck it in. And it was just, I was just gonna say, it was just nice to see how quickly she kind of caught on to the game. And she was like, I was like, well, what do you want to do? And she said, well, I think we should play this card because of, X, Y, Z. I want to hear your thoughts on the Oppo bot from your perspective, but I was just going to say also, to me, it definitely feels like it's meant to be a 2-player game. Like that 2-player experience. It's great having that human opponent, like responding to what you're doing. And like that tug of war is just like a little bit different than playing. Like, I think the Oppo bot is super cool. And it's a good, like challenging solo experience, but like, I feel like this game is going to shine with 2 players. I've only tried it with 2 players and solo. So I haven't played it with 3 or 4 players, but when you play with 3 or 4 players, you're basically going to have, like, if you play 4 players, you're going to have 2 people playing as suffragists. One person will take the yellow pieces. One person plays the purple. And then the opposition, like everybody will split. Instead of having a hand of 7 cards, I think you each have a hand of 3 cards or something. So, there could be something interesting there with that team dynamic, especially if you're playing with families, or maybe people newer to games that, don't want that responsibility of being on their own. Yes. So I love that there is an option, but I feel like that 2-player game is like where it's at. Yeah. What did you think about the Appobot experience?
I was actually going to agree with you. I haven't played it 2-player, but it definitely does feel like it should be a 2-player, or would play best, at 2 players. You'd have that cool interaction we were talking about. I'm not a solo gamer, so let me put that out there. Like lately I've been playing games solo to learn them, but I am not a solo gamer, and I found this one easy to follow. Like I found that the Appobot was done quite well in that regard, and I had not a lot of issues learning the game with that. And I think playing solo, if that was what you had to do, I think you would still enjoy it. But I 100% agree with you that I do think it's a game that would probably shine at 2 players.
Cool, yeah, and complexity wise, I felt like this game just feels very accessible to me, and like they are intentionally trying to make it as accessible as possible. Oh, yeah. Like definitely like maybe on the like very light side of medium or the heavy side of light. And from my experience, my games were right in that 60 to 90 minute window. And I think that felt good. Like that felt right for this game. And again, my mom got it. So I think if you're somebody who has played like a lot of card-driven games, you're going to jump into this like so easily. Or if you play games that have, the area majority where you're adding cubes to a map, Rumble Nation shout out or call back there.
Exactly.
But yeah, what did you think about like the complexity?
No, I agree with you. I think I like to have an idea going in, and I think I put about like medium, but on the lighter end of medium.
Yeah.
And my games take a little bit longer, but that's because, like I said, I'm not a solo player, and I like to hum and ha when I play solo. So
yeah,
because I'm double checking to make sure I'm not cheating and doing the thing. So I definitely think had I played it just quickly, like how I normally play, it probably would have fallen in the about 90-minute area, which seems you're right. Seems right. Yeah.
So I always think about like whenever I play games, I try to think about like, oh, like did this game feel similar to something else or remind me of something else? And Votes for Women, after playing it, especially I think after maybe my second game or so, like I thought about a game I played last year called Corrupt Bargain, the 1824 presidential election. Okay. It's a game by Alex Berry, and it was designed by Alex Berry and published by Decision Games. Right. And it's a very similar weight game where you have cubes on the map. And in that one, you kind of, each player is one of the major candidates: Adams, Clay, Crawford, or Jackson. And you're trying to become the next president of the United States, because there were some interesting things that went on back in that time period. And that game is, again, it's another good one in this weight range, but it feels different, but there are some similarities.
Right.
And then I know Tori in her designer notes mentioned that she was inspired by 1960, The Making of the President by Jason Matthews and Christian Leonard, published by GMT Games.
Okay.
And that's where it's a 2-player game where your campaign managers basically replaying the 1960 presidential election. So it's cool that like these two games kind of come to mind, but like Votes for Women is, complete different topic, historical topic, and approaches it in Tori, approached it in her own way, which is cool. Yeah. Did you find this to be similar to anything else you've played, or?
This is tricky because I don't play a lot of I actually don't play a lot of historical type games. I mean, I appreciate them. I've just not played a lot of them. But if you wanted to break it down in like specific mechanics, and people are like, that's not the same. I'm like, I'm not saying it's the same, but you just might think of these kinds of mechanics or ways to play. Like, for example, the game Obsession. That's a game where you get a bunch of cards. You have actions, you can use them for different ways of playing the card, and there are sometimes conditions based on that. And I mean, there are lots of games that meet that criteria. That's just one I could think of that people might relate to. And then putting cubes on the board like that always reminds me of games like rail games, where you're putting cubes on the board and trying to get a specific area. And again, it's a very generic way of explaining it, but that's kind of how my brain
it's what comes to mind when you're pushing the cubes, and like Obsession comes to mind when you have a game that's heavily driven by the cards. Correct. And everything.
Get it.
I totally get you. I was picking up what you're putting down.
I love it.
And I think that's interesting, because everybody has different perspectives on like different games they play and how what a game they play makes them think of. Right. And that's really interesting.
Right.
So I was also thinking about like, who this game is for, who it's not for. Yeah. And a couple of things I was thinking about was like, again, I think it's awesome with 2 players. If you like tense 2-player games that don't take, a ton of time to play.
Right.
It will be in that hour to an hour and a half window once you are familiar with the rules. You might be able to get it down faster.
Sure.
Maybe. But it also, it has a really cool, challenging solo experience with a bot that's easy to run. So I don't know, if I would necessarily, like, if I'm a solo player, get this specifically for the solo mode.
Right.
I think that's more of a bonus, but it's really cool that there's that option for people to kind of experience it that way or just learn it that way. And I think it's awesome because it's educational too. So I think anybody who's interested in learning about different aspects of history or like families or students, maybe, I think this would be great at schools. This would I think people learn well from board games, because it's you're actually interacting and like you're in the mindset of whatever kind of side you're playing on.
Absolutely.
But I will say there's a lot of dice rolling.
Yep.
So some people hate dice rolling, or strongly dislike dice rolling. So this might not be your jam if you're like really averse to dice rolling. But I will say, I like the choices that they made with the dice, in that they have several different types of dice.
Exactly.
And for different things you do, like you might be rolling D8s for this, or you might be rolling D6s for this, or those D12s that range from 1 to 4. Like there's like it seems like there was a lot of thought in that, and I like that you can sometimes play an event card to do something with using better dice, with better odds. But there are dice.
Yeah, and there are some people who just don't like a lot of, and I put this in quotes, randomness in their games, and that's fine. But I definitely think people who maybe want I say light conflict because this isn't aggressive, in my opinion, and want to kind of foray into this type of game. So for someone like me who's never played, like not really played these types of games, I'm like, oh, this is a nice little tickle to that thought, and I might continue with that. Or maybe you're like, this was good, but this is as far as I want to take it. So I feel like the people who maybe just want to get into it, this is like an easy way to scratch that itch.
Sure, yeah. And I think in terms of like replay value, I think this game will see a lot of variation through the different event cards, because yes, you're playing with the same deck of event cards, but every time you play, like your early cards are shuffled. Like every period is shuffled. So you don't know the order in which you're going to have certain event cards in your hand. You don't know the order in which your opponents are going to have certain events in their hand. Plus, each game, you're using a different set of 9 randomly selected state cards.
That's right.
And like that's kind of going to vary things up a little bit. And then I think it's mostly going to be like that variation is going to come from the event cards.
Yeah, no, I think you're absolutely right. Solo, I worry about it. Like, I'm not saying that it would be bad. I just don't know if it would be as exciting going forward. I definitely think what you were saying before, though, having that interaction with 2 would lend itself to, a different type of replayability. So
Totally. So overall, like, and I know these are initial impressions, like neither of us have played 100 times or anything like that. No, of course. But what do you think, what are your final thoughts on Votes for Women?
Yeah, and I mean, like I said, I can only do it from a solo perspective because I've only played it solo. And the fact that I played it solo of my own volition should tell you that I enjoyed it, because I wouldn't put myself through it again if I didn't enjoy it. And I think the theming of it also made it very interesting to me, but the theme followed up by actual information that was factual, and the fact that it stayed in line with that theme throughout the game, I appreciated that, and the easy play of the solo. I know you were saying it's a bonus, but like you were saying, someone who may want to play it solo, who has that opportunity, it's easy to follow with that Oppobot. So for me, I actually quite enjoyed this, and I look forward to playing it with 2 at a future time.
Yeah, and we didn't really talk about the Oppobot all that much, but the Oppobot is a deck of cards that you're kind of on your opponent's turn, you're flipping a card and it's telling you to do something, add cubes here, remove cubes there, or do something. And the map is really laid out well for that, because every region has a number, the 6 regions, and every state has a number. So when you need to randomly pick a region, you just roll a couple dice and it'll tell you where you're doing it. So it's really, really straightforward to run. Yeah. From my perspective, I love that it has like the historical topic is really, really cool, and it's very well executed. And, you end up having this, like, on top of that, having like a great tense gaming experience that's easy enough for just about anybody to jump into. But it's also very educational and, shines light on what that period of U.S. history was like on all sides. Yeah, absolutely. And then I love how the impacts of different current events and natural disasters and wars and other amendments kind of impact the game through the cards you play. And then, to me, like, as the suffragist player, like, I think you kind of feel this pressure on both sides, but there's just this pressure and this tension that you feel when you're playing this, which is really cool for such a game that's so like a medium, very light side of medium complexity wise. So I think it's really well done on all fronts, and I definitely like look forward to showing it to more people, playing it more, and also just like seeing other games that Fort Circle is putting out, because they seem to be kind of nailing it with these games that are fun, accessible, but also educational.
Yes.
Did you have any moments in your solo gaming experience with Votes for Women that were kind of like really memorable?
Not memorable in a good way, I guess, but it was not bad, but it was like, I'm like, I got this in the bag. I was all excited getting, my states in order. And then bam, I had a horrific card that popped out of the upper deck. And I'm like, wow, that just destroyed any
setback.
Right. Any feeling of victory was dashed. So just can't get too confident. That was my lesson there.
I had one of my 2-player games with my friend Richard. It really came down to the wire.
Ooh.
And our last round of the game, he decided, maybe we both had 4 cards left, and he decided to play an event card that was just something that's going to help if we did final voting, if we hit the final voting phase. Because he's looking at the board and he's like, there's no way we're gonna like end this early. So he's like, I want to prepare for final voting.
Right.
And so he played, so his whole turn is playing this event card, and it just sits out there till we hit final voting. And then on my next turn, or maybe it could have been 2 turns later, almost the last turn of the game, I ended up saving one of my strategy cards, and then I was able to play a card from my hand as an event, and then afterwards play a strategy card, and it let me get my last 4 checks out, and then I won the game. But the game just came down to the wire. And it's really cool too, because my friend Richard is who, when I was playing The Shores of Tripoli a lot, he played that one with me, and he ended up really liking this one as well.
That's great.
So that is cool. So that is Votes for Women. Be sure to check it out. See if it's something for you. I certainly dig it, and I appreciate the historical topic and, learning a bit more. And I think it's well implemented.
Yeah, absolutely. I 100% agree.
Cool. Well, Mandi, thank you so much for joining me. I'm glad we were able to do this together. And like I said, when I saw you had posted about this game, I was like, we should probably talk about this game together.
I'm glad we did. So good. And I'm so happy to be here. And hopefully we can do it again in the future.
Yeah. And I'm looking forward to seeing you at upcoming conventions, and we'll play some games together.
Absolutely.
Cool. Thanks again. You've been listening to the Board Game Geek podcast, produced and edited by Candace Harris. Special thanks to Matt Fonda for editing and mixing our music. Be sure to visit us on the web at BoardGameGeek.com. You can also find us on YouTube, Twitter, Instagram, Facebook, TikTok, and Twitch under Board Game Geek. You can reach us by email at podcast@BoardGameGeek.com. Thanks for listening, and happy gaming!